Maverick and the Machine is sponsored by Jones Plantation Film. If you haven't seen the indie, soon-to-be cult classic Jones Plantation Film yet, go watch that film. It's available now at jonesplantationfilm.com. That's jonesplantationfilm.com, and on a bunch of the other big platforms.
Bo Jones!
Now, let's launch this episode of Maverick in the Machine.
Insanity is what I call society. Don't tell me what to do, don't tell me how to be. I don't trust the government, I know they lie to me. They could like my body, yo, for my soul and mind to free.
All right, we got a real Maverick, Larken Rose, in the building. Larken, you want to, before we get started, maybe for a few people who are listening to this who probably may not know who you are, do you want to kind of give a couple sentences about yourself, explain a little about yourself?
Sure. Along the way, I've sort of become a fairly well-known advocate of a stateless society, as in no ruling classes, as in no government. And I sort of accidentally stumbled into that. I was raised sort of conservative, constitutionalist leaning, that kind of thing. But I like to debate people and I like to argue about politics. But I also liked to have a position that wasn't obviously self-contradictory. And so as I went along arguing in favor of, well, just a little government and the government that does this and that and the other thing, I noticed more and more that there were still contradictions in what I believed. And this was many years ago. I sorted that out enough to realize you cannot believe in government at all without having contradictions. So I sort of accidentally became a voluntaryist or an anarchist, to use this scary word that everybody thinks is throwing Molotov cocktails around. Really, it means I don't believe in masters or slaves. I don't believe in having ruling classes. And since 28 years ago, when I gave up statism, I've been writing books and making videos and causing trouble wherever I can and helping other people as much as I can to realize that they don't really believe in having rulers either. They've just been taught a bunch of stuff that rattles around inside their head and makes them think, well, it's necessary and it's legitimate and it's inevitable that, well, we have to have government, we have to have rulers. And as long as we vote for them, yada, 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 and trying to get as many people as possible to realize that's all just mythology that we're taught so that we behave like good little livestock for ruling classes. And I don't want humanity to be the livestock of ruling classes anymore. So I guess that's the short version.
Okay, so let's go back. Where are you from? Where were you born and raised? And what was your family dynamic like?
I grew up in Eastern Pennsylvania in the conservative and religious household. Pretty dang sheltered life, you know, a place where there's like no crime and people actually know each other and like know their neighbors and stuff. And so pretty dang easy life. We weren't rich, but we were comfortably, happily, not poor exactly, but you know.
Well, where were you? What town exactly? Where in Eastern Pennsylvania? I'm from PA, so I'm from Pittsburgh, obviously.
Little town called Brenathan, which is outside of Philadelphia. It's like Montgomery County.
Like how far is it? A suburb, or you're more in the country?
Yeah, it's suburbs. Although like half of Pennsylvania is suburbs of either Pittsburgh or Philadelphia. So it's Montgomery County and sort of on the edge of between city and just the rural that goes forever and it eventually fades into farmland and stuff like that. So grew up there at a little private school, and it was a religious school, but there was a very unusual, weird thing about that religion, which is it teaches people to doubt. It doesn't teach the blind faith that almost every other religion I can think of teaches. It teaches if you don't use your own understanding to figure out the world around you, then you're just, you know, you're at the whim of whatever liars come along to manipulate you. And that's pretty dang unusual for a religion. And I think that obviously had an impact on my willingness to question things, including religious beliefs, including political beliefs.
Wait, I want to get into this religion. Hold on. So you okay, but before we do, so you have brothers and sisters, your parents, they're divorced, they're together, Ozzy and Harriet, like what's going on at home?
My parents were together and they both passed away in their 80s.
Okay.
I had 8 billion siblings. I'm down to 2.
Hmm.
There were 6 of us in all. I'm the baby
Oh.
of the family.
Oh,
Um,
me too. Me too.
and and so there's 2 left now,
Oh,
um, other than me. So that's sort of sad. Although I was the youngest, and they were spread apart pretty far. So
brothers and
um,
sisters
it
or
wasn't
both?
like one every year. 1 sister,
Okay.
4 brothers.
Oh, wow. 5 boys. Okay.
So, and one really cool thing is every summer, because my dad was a teacher, he taught math and science, was very well known in the town. He was known as Doc Science and taught there for just ever. I don't know how many generations he taught math and science. And he taught them how to think, which disturbed a bunch of students who they only knew how to memorize and repeat from other teachers. And then they'd come into his class and he'd go, "How would you figure out this?" "What? I don't know how to figure out things." So, like, I'm sure he gets a lot of credit for my, you know, eagerness to actually understand things and question things too. And so every summer, because he was a teacher, we would drive across the whole country in our little falling apart VW van with a pop-up trailer. So I had been in the lower 48 states, I think all but one by the time I was 15 or something.
So you and you and your 6 siblings and your mom and dad would drive across the country in a VW van.
Yeah, and it was
Oh, that's
various
fun.
collections. I don't think it was ever all of us at once, but we were spread out enough. There's about 4 years between each. Like Sean, next brother up, is 4 years older than Nick. The next brother up is 4 years older than that. So there's a pretty big range. So it was never all of us, but it was often 3 or 4 kids and the parents driving across. And this is back when people used maps, like paper things,
I remember
not
those days.
GPS. And my dad and mom would like scout out a whole route across the entire country, and we'd camp all over the place. And so that was a grand old time.
Were you closer with your mother or your father?
I don't know that I'd say I was super close with either one. We got along perfectly fine, but they sort of had their lives, and with 8 million siblings, you sort of learn to entertain yourself pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I grew up, I sort of drifted away from them and had my own life. And then I'm really glad that I sort of drifted back. And then when I, went back and we'd talk and hang out, and they had a cabin that I used to drive them to almost every weekend. And when we sort of got back together, we got along great, because it was no longer the authority figure and the child. It was like, well, now we're all grown up, so we don't have to play that silly game. And we got along great for many years. And I'm really grateful for that I had that before they both passed away.
That's cool. Did you have any other siblings that were mavericky like you, that did crazy lifestyles or alternative type stuff?
Yeah, I think Sean, who's the next brother up, he makes me look normal. He literally lives in a tent year round in Pennsylvania. It is not because he's broke, like he's homeless by choice. And people say, "Oh, you can live without." He's like, "I'm doing this by choice." So he lives in a tent in the woods in Pennsylvania winters, which, for those of you who know Pennsylvania winters, that's not easy.
No.
And he literally cleans a 19th century castle on the weekends, and he plays piano he's an amazing piano player for like plays and chapel there. And so he has all this random assortment of things. And he's 4 years older than me, so he's pushing 60 now. And as a hobby, he climbs like 80 and 100-foot beech trees without a rope, without a harness,
What?
several of them a day as a hobby. So yeah, he makes me look normal by comparison.
Man, you mean to make a documentary film about that guy?
I know. Well, I have edited some of his climbs in the trees.
Wait,
But yeah,
like a tent? Is he glamping, or is it like a 2-man? What's the deal?
it's literally a pop-up tent.
Come on. How long has he been living in the woods again?
Is he up to 11 years now? He
Oh
he
my
did
God.
it. He did it 1 year to see if he could. Like I
He
wonder if
started
I
in his
could
late 40s. He did that.
Yes.
Okay. So
And just to see if he could. And he was like, that was easy and awesome. And so he, like in the house that I built half of, he still has a bunch of his stuff there, because like if If you want your stuff to not die, you can't keep it in a tent. But yeah, he's an amazing character, and he's a voluntarist now. He credits me with corrupting him into giving up statism entirely.
Well, he wasn't hard to convince.
Yeah,
He wasn't. That's a low hanging fruit right there. He's on the 1 yard line if he's living in a tent in the woods. You know what I mean?
Right. So he very quickly figures out. And there's no, darn it, I can't tell that story. There's a funny story about basically local law enforcement deciding to look the other way at something that's technically not really supposed to happen, but it wasn't hurting anybody. And so everyone's like, we're just going to pretend we don't know that's happening. So, but I can't tell the details.
Okay. Does he live in like a park, national park or something? Or is he living on somebody's property?
It's literally random woods. I won't say where exactly.
Yeah, of course not.
The people who own it know he's there.
So it's a private property.
Sort of, kind of, yeah.
Sort of, kind of, yeah. Okay, fair enough.
That's as specific as I'll get.
And he has a job. He works during the week and then just goes home to the tent.
Yeah.
Wow.
And when he wants to, he can go to a house and sleep inside whenever he wants. And people are like, "Oh, you're living in a tent." And they assume that it's out of desperation. He's like, "No, because I love it. It's awesome." And so, yeah, he just did that one winter to see if he could. And he's been doing that. He's been living there. And he'll like bathe in the stream and stuff and climb 80-foot beech trees, like several a day as a hobby at 60. Did his birthday happen? He's either about to turn 60 or already has. So he's quite the character.
What a savage.
He makes me look normal.
Yeah.
And he's so laid back, and like he and I talk about everything under the sun and philosophical things and everything you can possibly think of. But he's the most honest person I've ever met, as in almost everybody sort of says what they think other people want to hear. And so like if someone asked you, "Hey, can you help me do something?" Most people go, "Well, I'm sort of busy." And he'll just go, "I don't really want to." Or he'll go, "Yeah, I'll do that." And just so straightforward that it's sort of a shock. And he's totally nice, and he helps 8 million people in 8 million different ways.
Is he happy?
Yeah. And he's quite a character.
Well, I mean, we got to get that on, like, if there's anybody listening, that there's all kinds of documentary filmmakers. I mean, somebody could go with you, take a trip out there and just film him. I know you don't want to probably deal with it. Somebody that doesn't know him might be better at it anyway. You got to record that. You got to get him down. That's a very rare human being.
Yeah. And he thought of it at least documenting, because I've documented some of his climbs where I'm on the ground with my black magic, getting different angles of him climbing up a 90-foot tree and coming back down. So yeah, so he's quite the character. So
you could set up a couple GoPros or give him a camera, like go get him, interview him, and then just give him a camera, let him film himself for a couple weeks or something.
Yeah,
just feel for his lifestyle.
He has taken a little pocket camera up the tree with him to get the view of looking down, and looking down,
right.
the tree just turns into nothing. You can't even see it because the trunk is so far away.
I don't mean to beat this up, but last question. I mean, doesn't he get lonely out there?
No, because he deals with other people, and it's not like he just hides out there from the world. He actually has a social life. He acts in plays. He plays piano for chapel and plays and stuff, and knows a bunch of people. He knows like everybody in town, I think, pretty much. So it's not, he's not the hermit who doesn't talk to anybody. That's where he goes at night to sleep.
Wow.
And he likes it. And 8 zillion people have offered, "Hey, you can stay with us." He's like, "No, I prefer the tent in the middle of the woods in the freezing cold."
All right. So you're growing up in small town America. You've got a functional family. This is back when everything seemed like it was working here.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're in this school that's a religious school. What's the religion? What's going on there?
It has a few names. The Church of the New Jerusalem is sort of the long version. The New Church is what it was, what we referred to it as. It's based on the writings of a guy named Emanuel Swedenborg, who was himself an amazing genius inventor and scientist. So it wasn't just some wifty airhead. And he wrote 80 gazillion books. This was like back at the time of the American Revolution. And he wrote a bunch of books and said that he was given visions, allowed to see into the other plane of existence and explain like how heaven works and how souls work. Now, whether he was making it up, whether he was tripping, whether he was actually having those experiences, I don't really know. I wasn't there. But the consistency and the wisdom in what he wrote about human nature is kind of amazing either way, even if he just made it up. And so there's so much in what he describes. And basically a lot of his books were describing the internal sense of the word, the Bible, that it isn't supposed to just be literal stuff. It like signifies this and it means this. And so he wrote, I think it's like 30 some volumes about that. And it's amazingly consistent. And there's so much insight into sort of human nature and humanity in there, regardless of whether you're a Christian and regardless of whether you're even paying attention to the Bible, about how when people think that what's going to make them happy is lots of money or lots of this or comfort or whatever. And what actually makes people happy is being useful, having a mission, having a thing that you're supposed to be doing, something that benefits other people. And that's one of 8 zillion things he talks about. And he talked about relationship stuff and keep in mind, this is a couple hundred years ago. And of course he was biased by the culture he grew up in and stuff, but it's pretty amazing the amount of insight he had into human nature, whether he was given that from somewhere else or figured it out and just made stuff up. Like, I have no idea, but I think there's a lot to be learned from a bunch of people, whether or not I agree with their religion and whether or not I think whether it was divinely inspired or whatever. But that was the fact that he starts by basically saying you should doubt everything, including what I'm saying. Like if it doesn't ring true to you, if it doesn't make sense to your understanding, why would you accept anything? And he angered the establishment church pretty often, and he did it in the time where you could get like arrested for that.
So he had killed for that back then.
Yeah. So he had to be a little bit gentle about it, but he basically, he completely bashed the concept of faith alone, which is, I believe it because they told me to believe it. It's like, what? That's the opposite of being a human being. Like, you're given a brain and understanding for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
If you just blindly believe it because somebody else told you to, you're giving up your humanity. I mean, I'm paraphrasing. First of all, he wrote in Latin, not in English. So, but so there are a lot of those things, obviously influence the way I think and the way I doubt things, including stuff that he said, including stuff that everybody says. But growing up where you're allowed to question things, it isn't just whatever that book says, you blindly believe it. Like, there wasn't that. And then having my dad be a math and science teacher who liked to sort of tease people into figuring stuff out and actually using their brains for problem solving instead of what usually passes for education, which is memorize and repeat, basically be a parrot and then get a good grade for being a parrot. And he did the opposite. And there's lots of people who are now grown up who still remember learning from KR, is Kenneth Rose, who taught many a generation how to actually think.
Kenneth Rose, that's your father. So one of the things I really wanted to do with this show and kind of, I think is basically interview these sort of independent maverick people that maintain their integrity in this sort of insane kind of Barnum clown world we're living in.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's any through line or what the reasons are, what happened to them. It seems like that they became this type of person, which of course you are. And it seems pretty obvious to me that because you love, not only are you an independent thinker, but you love teaching, which we can get into later. That's obviously came down from your father. And then this sort of religion. Is it's called the Church of New Jerusalem is the name of the church that he created a church. This guy, he created a religion. What did he do?
It was, well, Emanuel Swedenborg. It's sort of ironic because they're based on the writings of Emanuel Swedenborg, but he actually never described a church.
Okay.
He used the phrase, well, I don't know what it is in Latin. He used the phrase new church to refer to the people who would have this new understanding of the inner sense of the Bible and the way humanity works and all that. He didn't actually envision it as a formal church, but then somebody made a church out of it, which is a little bit ironic and funny. And people in the church even sort of joke about the fact that, like, why did we make a church based on the writings of somebody who did not describe a church? He described a belief system and basically said anybody who understands this is part of it. You don't have to like join some organization.
There's a lot of people in, I'm not an expert on this, so this is just what I've heard, but there's a lot of people in Christianity who think Christ was the same way.
Mm-hmm.
He never, like a lot of people will say he wouldn't have been a Christian.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know enough about it, to be honest.
It's interesting because even like when I grew up and was going through, there was definitely just the cultural conservative authoritarian influence that sort of actually didn't match what Swedenborg said, but they tried to make an authoritarian church out of it, despite the fact that he said the exact opposite. And it was interesting when my daughter Alyssa decided, she was homeschooled, but she decided, or unschooled, she decided to go to high school there for a couple of years. So she went for 2 years and got a high school diploma because she wanted to see what it was like and try it out. And she graduated with honors after 2 years, skipped the rest of it. But while she was in there, we went, Tessa and I, my first wife, and Alyssa's our daughter, we went for a little orientation thing of her being at school. And it was interesting to see the change in attitude of one of the ministers who actually know, like he was a generation ahead of me, I think, daring to talk as if we're still trying to understand what it all means. And if something doesn't make sense to us, we don't just go, well, we're going to blindly believe it.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're going to question it. We're going to doubt it because that's how Swedenborg talked. You're supposed to do that even about what he said. And so even there, I can see just the cultural authoritarian influence that was just sort of everywhere, even that sort of fading off and being more open to like, it matters more that we understand it than that somebody beats us over the head with it. Like, yeah, if you don't make it your own and it doesn't ring true to you, of what use is it? It's just something you were taught to repeat. And that isn't understanding anything. And so to see that evolution and to see even ministers saying, you know, talking about Old Testament stuff and like, obviously this is not how we think people should behave, but there's still stuff to be learned from the stories and they can still teach stuff that isn't literally like stone anybody who does this thing or whatever. But yeah, that was, you know, definitely a huge influence on both my beliefs and my willingness to question things and my determination to try to like make things better. Because my mother and father were both just constantly doing stuff to help other people and in 80 gazillion different ways and showing by example, like there's a saying in the new church that there's a quote from, well, translated quote from Swedenborg that I think makes a lot of other religions uncomfortable, which is all religion is of life and a life of religion is to do good. So it wasn't about go to the church on Sunday and show everybody how pious you are. And like, that doesn't matter. How you treat other people, that is the thing that matters. Being a good human being, that is the thing that matters. That is the religion that actually counts. It isn't the rituals. It isn't the who you say your God is. It isn't any of that. It's being a decent human being and having compassion and understanding for other people, which very much perfectly matches voluntaryism. Is don't try to be dominating other people. Like there's some people you'll just disassociate with and others you won't. But it's funny because at the time I didn't notice, but now, and my brother Sean and I have talked about this, a lot of what Swedenborg said was obviously anarchistic. He described again, he said that he was allowed to see into the other world. Whether he was, I don't know. I wasn't there. But
Sounds like ayahuasca trip to me. Sounds like an ayahuasca.
Right.
Yeah,
Maybe it was, but
yeah, who knows?
But he describes government in heaven, and he says it's nothing but love. There is no coercion.
Mm-hmm.
It's people deferring to smarter people because they realize, okay, that guy, like it describes actual leaders who like, okay, we'll go to that guy because he knows stuff and he'll probably be able to settle this. There's no coercion, there's no power, there's no domination. And then he describes government in hell. And it's exactly what we actually have, a constant fight between people trying to dominate and control each other. So it's pretty damn funny. And that, you know, at the time, it didn't even occur to me to notice that because back when I was a statist and just sort of, you know, you skip over things that don't really mean anything to you yet. And then looking back, he absolutely described a stateless society as heaven, where, yeah, people follow other people and they learn from other people, and there are teachers and there are those who actually serve other people by sort of running certain things, but there's no domination, and it doesn't come from what Swedenborg referred to as love of dominion, which is the people who like to dominate others, which is absolutely the driving force behind like everyone who craves political power. Like they're the opposite of humanity. Because if your goal is to dominate somebody else's free will and control them, you are literally anti-human. You're trying to take away their humanity, take away their ability to run their own life and decide their own future and all that. And you're just trying to make them into a puppet for yourself. And that's the worst of the worst. And Swedenborg described, yeah, there's the greedy, selfish people who are just sort of jerks and don't really care what other people want, and they only care about themselves. But one step worse than that are the people who literally can't stand the thought of other people being free. Like they hate us for our freedoms. There are those people, and they're the people who pretended that people overseas are the ones we should be scared of. George Bush and Clinton and the rest of them absolutely hate us for our freedoms. They hate the fact that there are human beings not under their control. And I think it's something that it took me a long time to sort of come to grips with the fact that there are people like that. Like most of us can sort of understand someone just being sort of a selfish jerk and they don't care what happens to other people. But I think most decent people have a hard time imagining, like, I can't stand the thought of other people being free. And there really are people that demented, and they're always the ones who gravitate towards positions of political power. I mean, I remember years ago thinking, you have all these corrupt political crooks. If you can just play a game and get $1 billion, why wouldn't you just do that and run away and live in the Bahamas or something? Why are they still there? Because like they could have anything they wanted, just be corrupt, steal however many $1 million and run off. And they don't, because what they want is power over others, which is a step worse than just being a selfish jerk who didn't care if he hurts other people. They actively love the idea of dominating others, which is why Swedenborg referred to it as love of dominion. And his insight into how those people function was right on the mark. And that's, I think it's something that most pro-freedom people don't even understand. They just think, well, some people are selfish jerks, but they can't comprehend just how demented they are, because they can't sort of put themselves in somebody else's shoes and think and imagine being someone who literally has this like unquenchable thirst to dominate everybody else, not just have whatever material stuff you want, but the need to dominate others, which is as anti-human as you can get. Anyway, that's the end of my sermon.
Well, there's the flip side of that, and part of that is most people, you've kind of touched on this, but they can't imagine that there's people like that. They're good people, they're doing their best in a bad situation. They can't imagine that there's people in these positions of these basically criminal organizations that are literally hate them, are so anti-human, so evil. They just can't, because most people are decent people. They just want to go about their lives, and they just don't understand. And it's funny because they're still, even though they've seen all of the evils, particularly in the last 4 years, which has been a real revelatory period, they still think it's just those are the bad people. We got to get the good people. They're still on that good people, bad people, right, left kind of paradigm. And that's the flip side of what you're saying is it's not just the dominating people, but it's also what your religious Swedenborg wrote about apparently was I want to check out this guy's writing. The people allowing this to happen. You always say the belief in authority. I want to enhance that because I don't have a problem with authority I choose to have. If I go to jiu-jitsu and the coach is the authority and I respect and trust him, I'll respect his authority. It's there's a better word for it. Would be what? Arbitrary authority, but it's not arbitrary. It's the belief in authority you didn't agree to.
Right.
What do you call that?
As in the right to rule. And I make that distinction in the most dangerous superstition of.
We'll have the links of all your work in the show notes for the audience to delight in. But go ahead.
Because there are times we, like a football team, everybody goes, okay, you're the captain, quarterback's calling the plays.
Mm-hmm.
We're not each going to make up our own play. It's not going to go well, but everybody's there by choice. And like when you're trained by a personal trainer, you choose to be there. There's lots of hierarchies that resemble authority, except everybody is there by choice and they're consenting to sort of be subordinate to we have a crew who's building a house. Well, somebody has the blueprints. We kind of have to defer to him or the house is going to look like a catastrophe. So there's lots of ways in which consensual hierarchy it's actually essential for anything above caveman existence. Like you're not going to get any level of sophisticated technology or economics without that. But the authority I'm bashing is the notion that somebody has the right to rule somebody without their consent. Like you don't get to choose. We were elected or we were appointed or whatever, and now we're your rightful lords and masters, and you have to do what we say.
Well, let's solve this now. What's a better word than consent? Because they always, you consented when you voted. Boo. Like, what can we use? Like, it's what kind of authority? I can't think of the word. I mean, this is something we could think about and marinate on. It's not.
Well,
go ahead.
It's sort of just involuntary authority.
Involuntary authority.
Like
it's been placed upon you. It's been put upon you.
Yeah, it's imposed upon you rather than chosen.
And for all those out there that say voting means you consented or you have the right to vote, that if it's a consensual situation, I have the right to opt out of the system.
Yeah.
If I don't have the right to opt out of the system, it's not consensual. That's a very important point.
And the idea that if two people say, which one of us do you want punching you in the face? Like, if you're not allowed to say neither, thank you very much.
That's right.
Then it isn't consent. It's just a stupid shell game trying to disguise violent domination as like serving the people and the consent of the people and consent of the governed and all that nonsense.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier that the difference between like the way that we are organized here is hell and the way that your Swedenborg wrote about was heaven, and other people have talked about this. Mm-hmm. Excuse me, Illuminati. They got me. They got me again. Maybe that's what it's reserved for. Maybe we're not supposed to live in a free voluntary society here because there's so many people that, in other words, it would require such an increase in the level of consciousness of a small but important number of people that maybe this is how it's supposed to be.
Well, the thing is plenty of people can point to the fact that look at all these people who still vote and they still fall for the games and they still, they still seem to accept their role as human livestock, basically. The thing is, they only do that because they were indoctrinated into that. Even the weak-minded, even the stupid, even they wouldn't go for that if they weren't trained to feel comfort to that. It's like an animal that's lived its whole life in a cage, and then you open the cage door and it like backs away. It's like, close the door, close the door. Like, that isn't because that's its natural desire. It's because it was trained to be comfortable being livestock. And so I know a lot of people try to argue, well, you have to have a certain level of like IQ and responsibility to have a free society. I think it's all the way the other way around, that a society that bows to a ruling class encourages people to be stupid and irresponsible. And a society where you're you're viewed as being responsible for whatever you do and don't play the I was just following orders game. Like, you're you, what you do, that's on you, very quickly teaches people to be responsible, even if it's just like bad consequences are going to happen if you do dumb or malicious stuff in a free society. Like, whether you learn the hard way or you actually think about it, in a free society, you don't have throngs of dependent idiots yammering about how they're entitled to stuff, because nobody's giving them anything. There's no ruling class to use violence to rob Peter to pay Paul. So I think a lot of people look at the patheticness of a lot of humanity right now and go, this is why we can't have, this is why we aren't free yet and we can't be free yet. And it's the other way around. That is the result of not being free. Even if you look at just the US, which was it was never a free country. There isn't such thing as a free country, but it was a lot freer now. It had a lot fewer tentacles in people's lives, however many decades ago. And the levels of illiteracy were way better than they are now. Children out of wedlock was almost unheard of. It still happened, but it wasn't like half the kids
Right.
like it is now. And so I think it's easy to look at some of the catastrophes that have resulted from collectivism and from authoritarianism and go, humanity is not ready for freedom. But if you remove the state, just reality and cause and effect make people learn to be responsible, whether they learn it the easy way or the hard way. When there are consequences, if there isn't a ruling class to rob somebody else to give you free stuff, and you're sitting around going, I'm entitled to this and that and the other. Okay, well, nobody's giving it to you. So you can sit there and be entitled until you starve to death, or you can figure out you better get off your ass and find some way to actually be of use to somebody, so they might actually pay you so you can get food or learn how to be self-sufficient or whatever. So I think humanity is absolutely ready for it. I think it will be an uncomfortable process for a lot of people who have been so trained to view government as big daddy and big mommy government, and think that, well, whatever I need should just be given to me. And so I think a lot of those people may, if the state falls over tomorrow, they're going to have kind of a rough road to being grown-ups, because they've been trained to be children all their lives by a ruling class. But I also think humanity is very resilient. And when people have to grow up, they do. When they don't have to grow up, they don't. And a lot of people don't right now because, well, we'll get free housing and I'll get welfare and I'll get food stamps and I'll get this if I sit on my butt. Well, what if the choice was you starve to death unless you find somebody either willing to voluntarily help you or you find a way to trade with people to get food? I think, the people who predict, there'll be mass starvation. I don't think there would be. There'll be mass stress and worry and panic. And then a lot of people are going to have to learn to make themselves useful, literally, so that they don't starve to death. And I think that we actually have a lot of, when a big disaster happens and people are like, well, now it's just us. Now it's just the normal people. We have to help each other. We have to figure out what to do. Yeah, there are some obnoxious looters, but there are also a bunch of people who very quickly take on the responsibility of being a human being because they realize, people are dying. If we, the normal people, don't go do something about it. And so I think humanity is quite capable of growing up very quickly when it has to. And the trouble is government is trying really hard to make it so people don't have to grow up, don't have to suffer consequences for their stupid actions. And so it's training them to be idiot children, But I don't think that's inherent. I don't think that's built into humanity. I think that's trained into us and can very quickly be corrected in a world where you don't get rewarded for your need and for your whininess and for saying how entitled you are anymore. Now you better make yourself useful. You better demonstrate to other people that you're worthy of their voluntary assistance or voluntary trade, because otherwise you're in deep doo-doo. And I think that will be an uncomfortable process for a lot of people, especially like if the economy collapses, like don't be near a city, like be somewhere where people know how to grow food and like build stuff. But I think even there, humanity will adjust when it has to. It's just right now, a lot of people don't have to adjust. They can be lazy, basically leeches on society, and it doesn't matter because they get given free stuff. And as long as, it's like a domesticated animal, this fat dog sits on his ass all day because we give it free. Well, if you don't do that and you open the cage, eventually he's going to walk out and try to find food.
Well, what would happen? I mean, it's just like a domesticated animal. A lot of them are going to die. I hate to say that, but it's true. If you had some sort of societal breakdown, a lot of these people are going to die. That's just a fact. Especially these. I mean, some people are going to get their act together, but a lot of these very morbidly obese people and the really high brainwashed people, they're going to probably die. I hate to say that, but it's true. But the other thing you mentioned was wisdom and IQ. A lot of people say you have to have a high IQ. Wisdom is far superior to IQ. I mean, I've known people with very, very low, probably IQs, not very high operating systems that are very wise.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the one example, Mike Tyson. This is a guy with a very low operating system who has achieved the level of wisdom. He has an understanding of the world around him in some pretty interesting ways. He's done a lot of ayahuasca and this type of thing. Where was I going with this? Well, the thing is that I don't know. So there's an old quote that was attributed to Napoleon. How did you take over France? There was a sword laying on the ground and I picked it up. Unless you have, in my opinion, a society where the consciousness rises and the wisdom rises, if there was some sort of societal breakdown, there's just people going to come along, pick up the sword, start the thing all over again. And there's going to be throngs of people that worship them and admire them and thank them just like they've done in the past. No?
Yeah, well, that's why the foundational belief system matters like more than anything. That's
Right.
why almost everything I do is focused on trying to get people to give up the belief in authority, because in the long run, that is the thing that matters. Like people can talk about short-term and long-term solutions. What do we do about this injustice? What do we do about that oppression? Well, when enough people stop believing that somebody else has the right to rule them, the problem take care of itself. Like if, the analogy of slave days, like in Jones Plantation, if, and this is a tad controversial to say, if all of the slaves, just the slaves, recognized that slavery was absolutely illegitimate, it would have fallen apart. They didn't. And Frederick Douglass, who was a slave, wrote about this a lot. They were trained to accept slavery as legitimate.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them figured out, no, it isn't. But a lot of them thought, well, I guess I'm the rightful property of that guy, so I'm going to work hard for him. And it's, in that case, it can be really hard for somebody today to imagine anybody really being in that mindset. You actually thought this other guy owned you?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them did. And Frederick Douglass not only described that, he described his own progress out of that mindset and the gradual realization that this isn't okay. And stepping out of statism and authoritarianism is just the next step in that. Enough people realizing, why do we think we have to pay tribute to a bunch of crooks in DC or anywhere else? Yeah, as long as they think there's such a thing as a legitimate ruling class, one falling over is just going to result in another one being set up. But when humanity outgrows that and realizes, no, we each own ourselves, we're not beholden to somebody else. Nobody has the right to rule us. I don't care what scribbles and elections and rituals and constitutions you have. Like, I'm still in charge of me and nobody else is. When humanity just grows up enough to accept that, that is the end of ruling classes. Because then if Napoleon picks up a sword, everybody else goes, what are you doing, dude? Like, don't mess with us or anybody else, because yeah, your sword can kill a person or two. It's not going to kill all million if you can't convince them you have the right to rule, and you can't anymore because humanity has grown up. And that's why that's my entire focus.
If humanity grows up, humanity
Yeah.
grows up, not when, if. Now you're pretty white pilled on it. I'm pretty, see, I'm not, I wouldn't say I'm black pilled, but again, I go back to, I'm starting to wonder, are we is this realm that we're in right now, is it supposed to be like this? And it's a hell realm, maybe. I'm not agnostic, but but you think we're on the verge of coming around, don't you?
Yeah, I do think it's a when and not an if.
Really?
And the funny thing is, the me of 15, 20 years ago would have said, yeah, it's probably a when, but it's going to be hundreds of years away. And the me of today is like, it's decades, not centuries away from having huge parts of the world with no ruling classes. And I think a lot of the world is going to have to learn by example, because they're not that original and mentally creative. They have to see somebody else doing it and go, oh, they exist over there and they don't bow to a ruling class. Isn't it chaos and mayhem? No, it's just people being grown-ups. And so I think a lot of people will have to like see it in action. Just like a lot of people in slavery days were saying, well, how can these people possibly, be expected to be productive and survive if they're not slaves? They're going to be dying if we're not enslaving them. And one of the most brilliant things that I think Frederick Douglass ever wrote, he was free at that point, and he wrote a thing called What Shall Be Done with the Negro. And having just been a slave, like if anybody was owed reparations, it was him. He was treated as property his whole life. And he still had the wisdom to say, hey, all you in government talking about how you're going to help us out, stay out of the way. And that's all. Don't help us. Your help is going to make it worse. Just stay out of the way. When somebody who looks like this is going to work, leave him alone. If he's learning how to read, leave him alone. Don't help him. And to have that much wisdom, like we were saying, that much wisdom and awareness to realize, like having just stepped out of slavery, to realize, don't ask for government help, because that's not how you get to be a responsible grown-up. That's just how you shift over to being a different kind of dependent subject. And the fact that he realized that so quickly and expressed it so perfectly is like that to me is it's a little version of what all of humanity has to do, which is outgrow the entire notion of who's going to fix this and who's going to do that and who's going to be in charge and who's going to sit on the throne.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, nobody. There won't be a throne. You're going to run your own life. Everybody else is going to run theirs, and we'll find ways to interact and cooperate and trade and all that. And
I want to get into that a little bit later, because I have some thoughts on that.
Sure.
Go ahead. I cut you off. What were you going to say?
No, well, that was the main gist. I think humanity is pretty dang close to that. And there's sort of even the remnant statism that's in the vast majority of people's heads, the actual respect for political authority has been going downhill for decades, even among statists. Like it used to be, you don't like insult the president, even if you disagree with his policies.
Oh, you got to respect the office. You got to respect the office. Yeah.
That was in my lifetime that like, oh, I met my congressman, and oh, you don't speak bad of the president because he's our president. And now everybody on both sides, your guy is a slimeball, lying piece of crap. And I actually think that's progress, that people are now allowed to openly express, yeah, everybody in politics is a crook. We just think those guys are bigger crooks than these guys. Mm-hmm. So we're voting for these guys. But the overall respect for authority, and it used to be like only the most, scofflaw hippies would ever criticize the police. And now lots of normal people are going, yeah, they don't really protect and serve anybody except the ruling class. And so
legally, that's actually just came down the so-called Supreme Court, where they don't actually have any legal obligation to protect you. Did you know that?
Yeah.
They literally don't have any legal obligation. Not that they ever did anyway, but really, but they work for them.
Yeah. And the courts have ruled that for decades. I forget what the recent one was, but yeah, when people are like, well, they protect us. Yeah, if they don't show up, you can't sue them because they have no obligation to protect you. Like I think the only people they have an obligation to protect under their, their view of the demented view of reality is people actually in their custody, which they don't do that either. But at least then, well, we sort of expect them to not like murder people who are in their custody, but everybody else, you're out of luck. If you call them and they don't show up, or they do show up and they just leave and you get murdered, as happened. That was the one case, as somebody was called them a bunch of times and then got beaten up and murdered, I think. And they sued, and they're like, no, they don't actually have to save you from anything.
Well, everybody could see that in 2020, and when the riots and all these private businesses are getting burned to the ground and people are getting killed. What were the cops doing? Like, there's a great video in Chicago, that goofball mayor that they had. All the police were lined up protecting her house.
Yeah,
close the street down near her house. Their job is to protect them. They're protecting the system that pays them.
Yeah, they're the king's guards.
That's right. That's right. The government's good. I always ask people that say, "Oh, support the police. I love freedom." I was like, okay, so you're for mask mandates? You're for vaccine man. No, what is Nancy Pelosi going to come to my house and stick a vaccine in my arm or tell me to put on a mask? I'll stick your vodka bottle up her ass and tell her to get off my yard. It's the goons. It's the goons, enforcing goons that do it every time. But
yeah, now I should confess that when I was growing up in this sheltered little town with like almost no crime, and I saw all the TV shows and Hollywood movies of the cops being the brave guys who stop the bad guys. Mm-hmm. Like, I believe that crap.
There's a few examples. I mean, it's the system itself. It's the institution.
Yeah. Every once in a blue moon, they actually do that. Yeah. But basically, they spend tons of time and manpower and effort robbing people constantly for every stupid violation they can think of. Mm-hmm. And then tons of money on the propaganda to pretend like they're out there protecting us and going after murderers. And no, most murders they don't care enough to pay attention to. They're out there getting revenue. They're pulling people over for having a window tint that isn't literally out there with their little pieces of glass to see if your window's tinted enough that they can steal some money from you. That's what they actually are. So, but I wanted to believe in they're protecting and serving us BS. And when you're not seeing the reality with your own eyes, it's easy enough for lots of people, and lots of conservatives still think, well, the cops are there to protect us. No, they're really not. They're there to make you obey the ruling class. And a lot of people, weirdly, a lot of conservatives have learned the hard way, the truth of it, when they happen to be in the wrong place and we're on the receiving end of fascist lunacy. And they're like, hey, but I supported the police. Well, maybe now you know better. And you figured out that they don't work for you. They don't protect and serve you. They are literally the king's guards.
Well, Legal Man talks about this all the time. He's like, everybody believes in the court system until they actually have to go through it.
Yeah.
And then he's like, oh, you think the cops are protect and serve you? Try to do what don't do what they tell you to do one time. See what happens to you. See how much they're serving you.
See how protected you feel.
Yeah, I mean, once you go through the court system, you realize what an absolute joke it is. What it really is there for, and it's not to bring justice and blah blah blah. And it's messy, but it's the best system ever, and blah blah blah.
And the funny thing is, a lot of there's sort of like I try to look at things in the big picture and the long term. And so when government is just power happy psychos, like if cops get caught on video beating the crap out of some unarmed person, beating them to death or something, if they had the intelligence to at least do propaganda and go out and go, we condemn that, we're firing that guy, we're prosecuting him, then people could hang on to it. But now normal people over and over are seeing, well, here's the video of cops beating an unarmed guy to death. Here's their chief making excuses for it. Here's them investigating themselves and saying it was just fine. Like when the ruling class is that openly fascist, it actually helps push more people to understanding reality, because they're too dumb and arrogant to even know when they should at least hang one of their own thugs out to dry. Because like, well, you got caught on video being a total psycho. I mean, it happens all the time, but you got caught. So we have to come out and go, oh, wait, that's totally horrible. This is intolerable. Instead of, well, we investigated ourselves and No, that was fine.
We
We're
found
okay with
we've
it.
investigated ourselves and we found we've done nothing wrong.
Right. We've done
Um,
nothing wrong. Wow, what a coincidence.
Well, they do fire people because if you recall during the 2020 insanity, there was a couple different cops that came out and said, I'm not enforcing this. And they got canned. They
Yeah.
literally got canned.
Yeah.
So they will fire you if you don't follow the program. But
Yeah. And if you're a cop who reports on other cops being illegal, sadistic psychos, that'll get you fired or murdered by your fellow gang members. But the more that happens out in the open, and the fact that there are cameras everywhere kind of helps, the more people can see, like they can compare, well, here's the Hollywood version of the police protecting us, and here's real life of them just beating the crap and robbing
yeah.
normal people. And so more and more people are learning the reality that, yeah, all the BS about protect and serve and representative government and all the hogwash we were taught to make us put up with being treated like livestock, more and more people are realizing, especially in the last few years with the COVID insanity, a lot of normal, obedient people who like trusted government before, they were sort of bludgeoned into accepting, wow, something is horribly wrong. And I've talked to a bunch of people who before that happened, they were just sort of normal run of the mill, not paying attention to politics, assumed government was trying to do the right thing. And then they saw that happen, and some of them like were told to shut down their businesses, and they were like, no, what?
Now you're
And
messing with my stuff. Now you're
Right.
messing with me. And right.
Yeah,
Well,
now that my life is on the line, then they start to notice. And so it's, government is making more enemies of itself than anybody else possibly could have, which, it's horrible to see. But in the long run, it's kind of good that normal people are starting to see, wow, they do not represent us. They don't give a damn about us. They view us as livestock.
Well, before we go on, I did want to just step back that for those out there, Frederick Douglass was based. I mean,
Yeah.
his book on being a slave, it's not only is it's really like, I couldn't put it down, and I'm tough. I'm like, I can't, most books I read, I can't, they bore me. That book was exciting from beginning to end. And what I remembered, there's so many little things about it, but I remember what really set him off was he had a bad overseer, and the guy made him ride, I'm paraphrasing this story, but he made him ride this giant ox. What do they call those things? What they sit in the trailer? What are those called? A carriage? What are those called? Like with the horses and the
Cart, I don't know.
ox cart, but no,
Yeah.
like the cover, and they drive around with the, I
Mhm.
don't remember. And he had like made him go over this hill in the middle of winter, and he crashed the ox cart and almost killed himself. And he was so pissed off, and the overseer was going to beat him, and he's like, I'm not. And he gets into a fist fight with the overseer in the barn and beats him up.
Yeah.
And then the overseer thought, I'm dead. And the overseer would never mess with him again. And he said, at that point, he's like, I'm going to get free or I'm going to die. I've made a decision. I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
And that's so important. I think that if we're ever going to have any kind of freedom, which remains to be seen, real freedom, or we do step to the next level of consciousness, there's going to be a certain amount of people that are going to have to make that decision come hell or high water, because there is going to be a lot of terrible things that are going to happen in the adjustment period, probably, I assume.
Yeah.
But quickly, though, because once the people get involved, it's a self-organizing organism we are. It'll happen fast. Look at what happened in, whatever you think of the guy in Argentina, Malai.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Doug Casey's down there. I've talked to him before. He loves him. He lives in Argentina. He's like, the guy he gets on television or whatever, the internet, whatever he does every night, and tells them, just hang on. This is going to happen because they did this and they were involved in this and they had all these dumb, the institute for this and the institute that. I'm cutting this. I'm cutting that. There's going to be this is going to happen. That's going to happen. And like in 1 year, they have this massive surplus, and like the economy's like booming after like 100 years of misery. It happened in 1 year because he's ripping the government down. Again, whatever you think of the guy. So it would happen fast. But go ahead.
I think it's really important for people to understand just how powerless the ruling classes are without the people going along with it. Because it's easy to view, the big, scary United States government. They are vastly outnumbered and vastly outgunned by the people who obey them. It's only if the vast majority of people obey and a few like resist or disobey that they can do the show of force and drive a tank into your living room and whatever else. If 50% of the people just said, yeah, we're not doing this, we're not paying tribute to your crooks, we're not going along with whatever stupid law you have today, immediately it falls apart. It doesn't, it's
20%, 20%, 20%.
Yeah.
That's
10.
70 million people, according to the statistics of the population.
Yeah. And that's just an astronomical number of people if they just get, and it doesn't even require like an uprising and a revolution. If 20% of the people just said, yeah, we're not paying taxes due anymore, that's the end of the income tax, because they would be absolutely incapable of enforcing it against 70 million people who just said, we're not playing your game. Like, we know you can say it's illegal and huff and puff, but good luck huffing and puffing at 70 million of us. And that's if none of us even bother to like resist. If some of them resist, like then, you know, if tarring and feathering is brought back into fashion, well, then it's just done overnight, because then everybody quits who, you know, were extortionists for the state. If you don't have the compliance of the vast majority of your subjects, government has no power. And there's so many sad examples. One of the saddest is, you know, of course, you know, everybody knows Nazi Germany is the worst thing because Mao and Stalin were buddies with the U.S. ruling class. So they sort of don't get mentioned,
right?
Even though their body counts were way higher.
Right.
But to use the example everybody knows of, if people just said, you know, you can put me on a cattle car and take me somewhere and kill me, or put me in a van and shoot me somewhere, but I'm not going to walk there under my own power. You have to carry me there. That would have saved a huge number of lives. Not even resisting. I mean, I'm all in favor of people resisting and fighting back any authoritarian regime. But if people didn't volunteer their own energy to help oppress themselves, like all the people going along with the shutdowns, and if people just said, okay, if you want to come shut me down, you're going to have to show up with people with guns to shut my shop down. If everyone in the country did that, government would go, whoops, that didn't work. Never mind. Like, we can't even try. We don't even have the resources to attempt that. But the vast majority of people feeling an obligation to obey because it's the law and it's government oppress themselves on behalf of the ruling class. And if the mindset changes where they just don't do that, and we saw a bunch of that in like here in Arizona, Yavapai County, which is north of Phoenix, a bunch of people were like, we're not doing that. We're not doing shutdowns. We're not doing your dumb mask thing. And the sheriffs were like, we're not putting our deputies at risk trying to enforce these dumb, unconstitutional things on people who don't want to go along with it. So we're not enforcing it. And it just immediately fell apart. It's like, oh, well, guess that's not happening. It wasn't like there's a big showdown and a shootout. It was the sheriffs came out and said, we're not doing that. That's dumb. And we're not going to put our deputies at risk to try to enforce this stupid thing that's pointless anyway. And said that to the governor. The governor's like, you will do this. And the sheriff's like, no, we won't. It's like, oh, okay, bummer. And if the people don't go along with it, and especially if the enforcers don't go along with it, you realize there is no power. There's nothing to fight against if the people aren't acting as accomplices to their own oppressors. Anybody who hasn't read the thing by what is it? Is it Etienne de la Boétie the one that ends with I don't ask that you put the hands on the tyrant to topple him over, but just remove your support and watch him fall under his own weight. The rant that ends with that is awesome because it describes, like, who are you afraid of? Like, he's not the one oppressing us. We're the one oppressing us. Some of us volunteered to oppress us on his behalf. We're the ones spying on ourselves for him. We're the ones robbing each other for him. If we weren't there empowering him, we wouldn't even know his name. He wouldn't have any power. He wouldn't exist. And that's the awakening that has to happen, is for humanity to just go, well, you can sit in a corner and telling us all how you have the right to rule us, but we don't believe you. So who cares? Like, you don't have any enforcement power because we were your enforcement power. Like the cops and the soldiers and the tax collectors and the regulator, all the bureaucrats, that's the livestock agreeing to oppress the other livestock. And when that doesn't happen anymore, like the crooks over in, the capital, state capital, national capital, whatever, they don't matter anymore. If we're not helping them to oppress ourselves, there is no power. There's nothing to fight against, which is why it's entirely a mindset thing. And it's why I'm really dang optimistic, because at the end of the day, if people stop feeling beholden to crooks, there's nothing to fight against. There is no power left, because it's all from the illusion of, well, we have to do what they say. No, we don't. And when we figure out, no, we don't, there's nobody to overthrow. You ignore them out of existence.
So you brought up taxes, and before I want to just get one last thing. I want to go back a little bit because taxes have a lot to do with your life at some point.
Yeah.
So you move out of the house? You go to college?
Yeah, I just had a little 2-year associates in arts degree.
And then you start working? What are you doing for a living for a while? And then when did you start doing this? When did you start becoming a pro humanity guy?
I worked on a little ground screw in the town where I grew up, and then learned how to do tree work. And then I was doing that in summers. And then after a 2-year degree in college, where I didn't even like have a major that I'm trying to learn. I was like, why am I in college? Like, I'm not learning anything I actually care about.
I wish I had that wisdom at that age too, but go ahead.
Well, it took me a while.
Yeah.
And then I worked full time on the ground screw there, and I learned how to do tree work and mowing and driving the big mowers and a million other things. And then along the way got interested in politics and started writing stuff about that. And so that was all, it was 96. The only reason I know it was 1996 when I finally gave up statism is because I remember on AOL, I was xragnar1996 at AOL.com. And it's a reference to Ragnar Danishold, which is a character in Atlas Shrugged, who, since we're talking about taxes, what the character does is rob the ruling class and give it back to the people who it was stolen from. So, but that was the year I finally stopped believing in government at all.
Did you start doing you've written, obviously you're an author, you've written a bunch of books. Was that when you started writing your books, or when did you start moving into this? Well, the internet wasn't really a thing. There was the internet in 96, but were you doing videos at that point, or what's
there
going
were
on?
There were AOL chat rooms, and that was about the extent of my exposure to the internet. That's about all there was on the internet. So I wasn't doing videos yet. There wasn't YouTube yet. No, I don't think it exists. I wasn't on it, whether it existed or not. I don't even think
it came out in 2004.
Yeah.
Don't quote me on that, but go ahead.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
6, actually. I think it's 6, but go ahead. Sorry.
So I would talk about things, and I would argue in little chat rooms and stuff. And then I started to write little articles, and then the first book I wrote was How to Be a Successful Tyrant, which I need to get back into print. That was a fun one. And that came out that didn't come out till 2006 while I was in a cage. It was written before then, but my fun adventures with the federal extortion racket happened before then.
Okay, you got to tell this story. So tell what happened and what'd you do.
So here's the thing, and I rarely talk about this in public because people have no reason to believe me and no reason to put in the effort to find out if I'm right. So I'm just like, whatever. If you want to look into it, I still give it away for free.
Okay.
Short version, I was already an anarchist and recognized that taxation is theft. It's immoral. It's illegitimate, no matter what their scribbles say. But along the way, I heard people making claims about their scribbles of they're unconstitutional or they're voluntary or their 16th Amendment, like all these theories about why the federal income tax wasn't what it appeared. And I started looking into it. I was like, they were wrong about that. And they made that up. Like, it's immoral the whole time anyway. But people talking about there's some technical reason why the income tax is unconstitutional. And so I kept looking into one theory after another and going, yeah, that didn't add up. And then somebody pointed at me at another theory. And I was like, okay, I'll look into this one too. And I'm assuming it's going to be the same thing where you're taking stuff out of context or you're not understanding. Like, it's all bogus. It's all illegitimate and immoral, but it's still legal within their crappy, illegitimate framework. And I started looking into it. And not only did I find stuff that backed up the claim, which I'll give the short version of it momentarily, I then got obsessed with digging into it, and I went all the way back and traced the entire history of all the federal income tax statutes and regulations and found tons of evidence backing it up that the person I learned it from didn't even know about. So instead of, oh, some guy somewhere claimed this thing, it was, holy crap, did you know about this? And the guy was Thurston Bell that I first heard about it. And I went back in history. I was like, holy smokes, the whole time. Okay, here's the punchline that people have no reason to believe and no reason to put in the effort to find out if it's true because it sounds so utterly ridiculous. I'm aware of that. There was never an income tax on the domestic income of Americans. It was an income tax on international trade because that's what the feds have jurisdiction over. And the Supreme Court said, because this is Peck versus Lowe, I believe, because Congress not only has the general power to lay and collect taxes, but specifically has jurisdiction over commerce with foreign nations, they can undoubtedly impose an income tax on income derived from commerce with foreign nations. That's what they did. And that's what the statutes and regulations show they did. And it said that since the beginning. Now, I know this sounds bonkers. If anybody cares enough to look into it, if you go to larkenrose.com, you can get my taxable income report that spells it all out and gives all the citations and the entire history of the whole thing. And just, it used to be literally one paragraph that said gross income is everything except, all income except what's exempt by law. And by that, we mean exempt by statute or what is, quote, under the Constitution, not taxable by the federal government, end quote. That is what the definitions, the official federal regulations said was meant by gross income. I have never met a CPA or tax attorney who knew it ever said that. And I showed them copies of it and they go, I don't know what that means. Oh, God.
Have they not updated it since then? I mean, isn't there?
They can't. No, well, they've updated it as in making it way more confusing. Okay. But it's totally still there. And they would take like one little paragraph that anybody, like the section about income from within the US, because there's different rules about income from outside. If you're a citizen, you're getting income from outside the US, it's taxed in a lot of cases. The section about income from inside the US, which everybody assumes, well, of course, everybody has to pay taxes on that, for a gazillion years said, if you're a non-resident alien doing business in the US, or you're a foreign corporation doing business in the US, or you're certain citizens who have possessions income and apply a weird rule, then income from within the US is taxable. And everybody just assumes, well, you mean in addition to everybody else too, right? No, never said that. And they've made it harder and harder it used to be literally one sentence. Now it's a really obscure section, 26 CFR 1.861-8, for those who care, 30 freaking pages of the most convoluted crap you've ever seen. And I remember reading through it like, what? They're literally writing this, trying to confuse the shit out of people. This doesn't make any sense. But I traced the whole thing through the whole time. The entire time, what the tax code actually said was, income from within the U.S. is taxable for foreigners, non-resident alien foreign corporations, because that's crossing international boundaries. And income from outside foreign earned income of U.S. citizens is taxed because that's crossing international boundaries. Somebody doing business in one of the states isn't under federal jurisdiction. And that isn't to argue it's unconstitutional. That's why from the very beginning up to right now, the statutes and regulations have said, here's what's taxable. For citizens, it's foreign earned income and possessions income. And sometimes if you have some of both, you can invoke a weird rule that sometimes makes U.S. income taxable. So anyway, if somebody, I give away a free PDF of my book, Kicking the Dragon, which tells the whole story, gives the whole report, and then the whole story of my trial for anybody.
That's at larkenrose.com?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll put the link in the show notes.
For the whole book, if you email me at larkenrose.com, I can give you the whole book. The report is at larkenrose.com. But the whole Kicking the Dragon book, which I hand wrote most of in prison. So
you're in prison for a year. You wrote that book. You hand wrote it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hand wrote that. Hand wrote The Iron Web, the novel. Wrote a bunch of music. Started on The Most Dangerous Superstition. But
what about bench press? Were you doing some bench press?
Yeah, I was doing some exercise, lost a bunch of weight, and ran around. I was in minimum security. Literally wasn't a fence around us.
How was your year? Was it miserable? Was it depressing? What was like?
It was frustrating and depressing. It wasn't at all like scary prison movie. It was just dumb waste of time. Because in minimum security, that like everybody knows the people there shouldn't be in prison because they're not a threat to anybody, which is why we're literally not locked in and there's not a fence around us. We're like down the hill from the medium or maximum security. This was in Waymart, Pennsylvania. So nobody there is scary and dangerous, and nobody's getting shanked or any of that, any of the crap that happens at higher security. So it was a giant waste of time rather than being scary. Mm-hmm. But it was depressing and frustrating. You're not allowed to run a business. You're not allowed to do anything useful. So the main frustration is Tess and Alyssa are on the outside, like falling behind on bills and losing the business and all that. And I'm sitting in a freaking cage. Unable, like, that's if I was just me, I would have been like, okay, screw you, I'm gonna write some books you don't like. Be out in here. So it was, that was frustrating and horrible.
What did you do exactly? So you figure this thing out with the taxes, the tax code. So then you decide not to pay your tax, and you were public about, what were you trying to do? What did you do?
First thing I did is write a letter to the IRS and said, we're not filing for the year coming up. And here's why. I'm going to explain it. If you want to have a meeting, let me know, because I'll have a meeting with you in person. And we did. And I recorded that. And I have them on recording, which I wasn't allowed to play for the jury. That the number of ways in which they had to cheat in the trial was amazing. But the short version is I went to the meeting. I showed them their own regulations. And they're literally saying on tape, still have the recordings. We don't know why it says this. We've never seen this before. We usually just look at the general definition. I'm like, yeah, I'm aware of that. But this regulation that you've never seen says that general definition sometimes include income which is exempt. You see where it says that? And they're like, yeah, we're not sure why. Okay, you see what the next thing is that it says? The following are not exempt. And it lists the foreign earned income of U.S. citizens. We agree I don't have any of that, right? Well, yeah, you don't have any of that. Then non-resident aliens and foreign corporations, we agree I'm not that. So it says the definition you're relying on, sometimes that's exempt, and then it gives a list of what isn't, like what's taxable. And I'm not on the list. And they're like, yeah, I'm not familiar with these. And they'd walk out of the room and come back in and have their books and rummage around. Several different meetings with several different people. I have audio recordings of them going, we're not sure why it says this. We'll have to get back to you. That was how it ended, literally, until they raided me. A year later, a bunch of armed IRS fascists showed up to invade my house and steal all my computers and a video I had made about it. Literally, it ended with them going, we'll have to look in, because I said, you don't even know your position. And they admitted they didn't know their position. Like I said, I think I'm supposed to look at these sections because here it is saying I'm supposed to. Do you agree or disagree? And they're like, we're not really sure. Okay, well, let me know when you are sure. It's hard to argue a position when you admit that you don't know what yours is. So when you figure out yours, I'll come back in and we can meet again. Until then, I don't know what to argue because you literally don't know your own position. And they admitted it on tape more than once. They do nothing, didn't try to collect, didn't do a levy, didn't do any of that. And then they raided me a year later, did an armed invasion of our home.
What year is this?
They raided us in 2003.
Okay, so you're not out there. Are you out stumping? Like this is...
I had made, the reason they actually raided me is because I made a video called Theft by Deception, which spells out the history of the whole thing. I think you can find it on YouTube, not on my channel, but
YouTube was up at so YouTube was already available at that point?
Yeah, because now we're into 2000 and YouTube existed by 2004.
Okay.
Wait,
Whatever. I might get hung up on
yeah,
timelines.
but it was a VHS
Yeah.
tape when they showed up to steal every copy they could of that.
Yeah, see, that's
Like,
what it is. They
Which,
can't
by
have
the
that.
way, is totally illegal, but they admitted right to my face, yeah, we're here to take every copy of theft by deception. I'm like, there's nothing illegal about it. Doesn't even tell anybody to do anything. And the Supreme Court specifically says, if there's something you're alleging is illegal, you're allowed to take one of it. And they showed up with the intention to steal every copy they could of the video I made. And I said, well, when do I get them back? Because a search is just, unless it's actual contraband or something illegal, eventually they have to give it back. And he said, this is Donald Perlman, IRS special agent. He showed up and said, you're never getting them back. He showed up to steal a bunch of legal videos and never give them back. And he said that to my face. Eventually I did get them back. Took forever in the courts and stuff. But the raid was because they didn't like me saying stuff. It wasn't about me not filing. Of course, there isn't a crime of saying stuff. So what I was actually charged with eventually was misdemeanor, willful failure to file, not even tax evasion, because they had to admit I didn't hide anything. I went to them and told them what I was doing and why, asked them for their input, asked them for anything that would like prove me wrong or at least give me a contrary position. And they admitted, we don't know, quote, we don't know. We'll have to get back to you. And that was the last they said before they did an armed invasion of my home.
So they do an armed invasion. You go to court. They give you a misdemeanor, and you go to prison for a misdemeanor.
Yeah.
And they give you a year in prison. They give you 2 years, let you out in a year. What they do?
It was 15 months.
Okay.
It was several counts that added up to 15 months. I know two people. I'm sure there are more. I know two people who've ever been to federal prison for a misdemeanor, me and Wesley Snipes, for the exact same thing. And it was for loudly saying they're lying about their laws.
Yeah.
And the other people in prison were like, nobody comes here on a misdemeanor. I was like, I can show you the paperwork.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, why? That's not how anything works. It's like, well, it's how it works. If you're a threat to their power, like, then they don't, like you were saying before, people who've been through the court system learn the hard way.
Mm-hmm.
And my book, Kicking the Dragon, I won't get into the whole story, but anybody who wants the free PDF, the number of ways in which they had to lie and cheat their asses off because the judge had to make sure, like, you can't let the jury hear the IRS agents going, we're not sure why it says that. Yeah, we see why you think that. Yeah, we understand why that's your position. We're not sure of ours. We'll have to get back to you. That's literally how they left it before the raid happened. So the judge decided, I'm going to pretend that's hearsay and not let them hear that. It's also hearsay, all the letters back and forth of you explaining your position and them going, we don't really know what to say about that.
So you have all those letters and you have the recording of them.
Yes.
And you have those letters, obviously.
Yeah. Have giant paper trail. Wasn't allowed to show the jury any of that. All the recordings, wasn't allowed to show them any of that. They illegally,
you got two. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
The slimeball IRS agent pretended
Perlman, that piece of shit Perlman.
No, this is a different one. This is Charles Judge. He was a revenue agent. Paper pusher?
What are you doing now, Charles Judge? You wife beating drunk scumbag,
slimeball piece of shit.
Yeah.
Well, he invited me out. Was like, I'm sort of curious about this. I hadn't heard of this before. So we meet at a restaurant. He's wearing a wire, which, by the way, is illegal in Pennsylvania. So he illegally records me having this whole discussion, painting it out for him, giving him all the documents, showing it, hoping I'm going to say, well, I really believe I'm required to file.
Mm-hmm.
And so I explain all this. And they don't use any of it because they're like, damn it, he obviously believes that. Because in federal tax cases, they have to prove that you set out to break the law. If you think you weren't required to, they can still try to collect, but they're not supposed to prosecute. And the judge even says, if you think he believed that he wasn't required, you have to acquit. No matter how, and the words of the Supreme Court are, no matter how unreasonable you might deem such a belief. All of their witnesses said they understood that I believed I wasn't required to file. Their witnesses on the stand in front of the jury, I got all of them to admit that they had said to me before, and they still understood why I believed I was not required to file. And the jury of imbeciles still said guilty, even though their witnesses, the prosecution witnesses, all admitted, yeah, I believed I wasn't required to file. And I was also right, but you're not actually allowed to argue that in court because the judge says, I will tell them what the law is. Never mind that I don't know a goddamn thing about the law, but I'm the authority on law. You're only allowed to tell them what you believe it is. So, but the number of things they lied and cheated about was just amazing. And I still have the emails they sent to my list because there were a number of people paying attention saying, I don't know how this is going to turn out. And I tried to be the guinea pig. I ran full page ads asking them to prosecute me because they hadn't prosecuted anybody under this. And I didn't see anybody in a better situation to have a chance to win. And I said,
before they raided your house, you ran full page ads.
Yes. Years before.
Oh, okay.
And saying the whole situation again. And I told people, whatever the outcome, like I may win, I may lose. And by the way, everybody don't do this. This is not a safe thing to do.
Yeah. Don't try this at home.
Yeah. This isn't, I'm totally going to win. This is, this may be really dang dangerous and go horribly. But I said, watch what they do, because regardless of whether I win or lose, I will show them for what they are, which is a bunch of lying, crooked mafia thugs that don't give a shit about their own laws or rules or regulations or anything else. And the funny thing is a bunch of people who were paying attention ended up turning into voluntarists based on something that had nothing to do with voluntaryism. It was just, they saw the nature of the beast in the proceedings and saw that, wow, the whole show they put on about justice and law, none of it mattered. It's just, you didn't pay tribute to the king. We're going to do anything we have to destroy you and terrorize you and, harass you. Like the armed raid, for those who know anything about the law, when you get a warrant to raid somebody, you have to describe, here is the evidence, the particular evidence of a particular crime that we think is there that we have to go find. Like if the cops go, here's why we have reason to think that there's a bloody knife that he hid in his dresser. And we're going to take it to a judge, and the judge goes, yep, that sounds reasonable. Now you have a warrant. In their application for the warrant, they literally forgot to mention any evidence of any crime. It was a list of them complaining about me saying what I think in public. It was literally, can we go do an armed invasion of his house? Because he keeps saying what he thinks in public. That's not how warrants are supposed to work. They literally weren't looking for anything because they already had all of our finances. They already had the video because I had sent it to them. And that came out in trial too. Like, why did you feel the need to raid my house to get the videos when I had sent it to you? I had sent it to like 50 different IRS offices voluntarily before that. So it was literally just, he keeps saying things we don't like. Can we go to an armed invasion of his house and terrorize him?
Did you have a jury trial?
Yeah. Because that was the only prayer. I mean, not much of a prayer.
Right.
People are idiots. But I mean, a judge trial, there's no way in hell a judge is ever going to side with me. It would have only taken one person with a brain on the jury to go, something's really weird about this, that they didn't hide anything. They said it right out what they were doing. They invited a response. And this is what happens.
One person who understood jury nullification could have been put them to sleep.
Yeah, that would have been the end. And
the truth in the law, not to cut you off, but the truth in the law had literally zero influence in your case. So, which is more obvious proof that there is no fixing a system that isn't broken. There's no fixing the system inside the system. It's not going to happen. Yeah.
And that's what I told people ahead of time. And a lot of people watching were like, holy crap. They didn't, like, the veil all the way fell off. Like there was like the guise of this being about law enforcement, when they admitted in their search warrant application that we hadn't hidden anything. Look, we want to raid his house. By the way, he's been open about everything he's done and given us all his records.
They kicked the door down, guns drawn, the whole 9 yards.
They they had hands on the guns. They showed up at the front door. They bam, 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 federal agents opened the door. We actually thought it was friends of ours joking for a second, because that's what our demented friends would joke about. So I go to the door, and I jam my foot by the door, and I go, give me the warrant. And so we're shoving for a while. And it was, they didn't give me the warrant at all. It was sealed for 18 months after that. I had to sue them in court a bazillion times just to get the application, because they didn't want people to see what a pile of bullshit that was. Wow. It was just, he's saying stuff, we want to raid his house. Mm-hmm. So they barge in and they like demand to open the gun safe and everything's legal and stuff. And one kind of intense moment, and they couldn't make me leave. It wasn't an arrest warrant. So I sat on my couch for 8 hours. Tess and Alyssa went off and did their thing, and it was a stressful nightmare. But one moment as they're coming up, what do you have those guns? And they made a show of like taking them out in the yard and measuring them. They're all legal. It's Pennsylvania, so go fuck yourself. But they had to like try to do a show of it. Why do you have this? Why do you have a 90-round drum? And I was like, that literally has nothing to do with the bullshit you're here for. And at one point I was fed up and said, listen, you Nazi fucks. I could have grabbed that and killed every one of you fuckers, and I would have been absolutely morally justified. Instead, I left them in the safe, and I came to the door and opened it. So shut the fuck up. And they did. They dropped that conversation quick, because, I could have exterminated those fuckers. I was hoping to do it in a little more peaceful way to demonstrate what a bunch of crooks they are. And so, but they were just, and I asked a bunch of them, do you even know why you're here? Do you even know what you're investigating? Well, no. Like what evidence are you looking for of what crime? We're collecting all your, and the search warrant was like all your paperwork and all your computers, which that's not how a warrant's supposed to work. It's just rummage through shit to see if we can find stuff. It's like, you have all my business records. I literally came to you and gave them to you. And you admitted that in your search warrant application. So it was, but a lot of people following that realized, holy shit, this is just Gestapo bullshit, because I was doing something that was actually a threat to their power. And so the whole facade of caring about their rules and due process, that was just out the freaking window. So I got to sit in a cage for a year, 2006.
To Kicking the Dragon, that, I don't mean to keep laying films on you, but that would be, I mean, if you guys considered, or maybe at some point we could make that into some sort of documentary and put it out. I don't know. You don't want to relive it. Maybe. I don't know. You got the audio. The audio is so good that would be really interesting. And then,
it's hard for me to read much of the book, my own damn book at a time. Because the number, I literally can't remember. The book is 488 pages. Mm-hmm. And I can't even remember all the ways in which they cheated. So I read it and I'm like, I forgot they did that. Oh, these lying sacks of shit. I better put this down for a while. My blood pressure is raising. So, and by the way,
really cool not to cut you off, but do that movie. I just had an idea. If you started the thing with like a preamble from a legal man talking about the system, because he was, he's a lawyer for 30 years. He still is.
Yeah.
And then just introing you into this situation. If you think that you're living in this situation, you're actually living in that situation.
Yeah.
You're living in this postmodern nightmare. And here's the film to prove it. But go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. It's still stressful. I mean, it's a lot less stressful now, but it's still. And
I can imagine the frustration. The frustration must have been just, wow. Yeah.
And the worst part by far, like I expect crooks to be crooks. I expect thugs to be thugs. That wasn't all that surprising. The worst part is the jury. I was going to represent myself because only then can I do opening and closing, and only then can I be the one to question the government's witnesses, which I did and got the.
Is there a videotape of that we can get? Can you get access?
Not a videotape. Somebody did audio record the entire trial, which you're not supposed to do.
You have that?
Yes, the audio recording of that.
Wow.
Absolutely exists. I didn't even know they were doing it.
Okay.
And you're not really supposed to. I'm not sure if they could get in trouble. I don't even remember the name of the person anymore. so I can't get them in trouble if I wanted to. But like I went in there and I started by saying, this is not going to be like any trial you've heard of or imagined, because this isn't about me getting caught doing something. That's why it's not tax evasion. I'm here by choice. I asked them to prosecute me because these people are defrauding you. Like, I could have just gone along and been quiet. I did this because you on the jury and everybody else are being lied to about the laws, and I can prove it to you, and I'm going to prove it to you. And so they knew the whole time. And the fact that they're sitting there watching the judge say, no, you can't see the video that he spent a year and a half making about the issue, even though the entire question is, what does he believe about the tax laws? Well, as it happens, I made an 88-minute video that took me a year and a half. Can I show them? No. So they're supposed to determine what I think without seeing anything I've ever said, because they can't play the recordings or show any of the letters or show anything from me saying anything I thought about it the entire time. They literally applied the hearsay rules to do that. Is I have to demonstrate what I believed without citing anything I've ever said on the subject. It really was that insane. In my closing, and the government objected a little bit, but you have pretty much leeway in opening and closing arguments. I held up the video and say, they've seen this video, the prosecutor table. All those people in the audience, because we packed the courtroom, they've all seen this. You're the ones who have to decide what I believe, and you're the only ones who were stopped from seeing this. They have the recordings of my meetings with the IRS. They've heard them. Everybody behind me, everyone in this courtroom has heard them except you, and you're the ones who are supposed to determine what I believe when they made sure you were the only ones here who haven't heard it. They've seen the letters I wrote back and forth. They've seen the responses. Prosecution has all of this. You're the only ones who weren't allowed to see any of that, even though it's on you to decide whether I believed I was required to file. And so I went through the whole list of things that were excluded. And by the way, this is when they interrupted, because how far along did I get? I said, because I have a former prosecutor and 2 former IRS agents who I wanted to testify to tell you that they agreed I was right about this, but I wasn't allowed to. They know who it is. They know who it is. You weren't allowed to hear from them. A former prosecutor, somebody who did that job, and somebody who did the job of 2 of the witnesses you've heard who came out and publicly said, I was right. And they're making sure you can't hear from them either. And so after all that, to still have the jury go, oh, guilty, sitting in a cage for a year. Like, yeah, the judge is going to be a crook. Prosecutors are going to be crooks. No kidding. But,
but you didn't lose your faith in humanity and to continue what you're doing, and you kept going.
The fact that I'm still optimistic is pretty funny. Maybe I'm just stupid and a slow learner or something. Yeah, and it's one reason I don't talk about that issue anymore, is because it's, first of all, it doesn't matter. Like, in the long run, what their scribbles technically say matters way less than people realizing we don't owe these crooks anything, no matter what their scribbles say. But it sounds so far out there, and the amount of effort it takes for somebody to find out. It's like if I said, oh, aliens landed on my house. Like, I would expect most rational people to go, you're full of shit. Mm-hmm. You're bonkers. Why would I believe you? So, like, okay, if aliens ever landed on my house, I'm not going to tell anybody. But it sort of felt like that. Like, people aren't going to put in the effort to find out, like, if this is true, because it sounds completely bonkers. And I thought it was completely bonkers. And there are a bunch of other claims that are completely bonkers and totally wrong that I dug into beforehand. But there were a number of people following it that I said, watch what happens, because I'm going to show them for what they are, at least. Be nice if I win, but win or lose, I'm going to show them for what they are.
I mean, you have to put that into some sort of a document. I mean, literally, like, it's all editing. I'd say 3 months, if somebody just takes 3 months of their life, and then maybe an interview of you, or definitely an interview of you, and maybe some other people that are involved. I don't know if there's other figures that would be interviewed. I don't know, that'd be your call, but that's something you probably need to do.
I might almost be able to ponder that now.
Mhm.
It was so freaking frustrating and infuriating, and for so long.
It's like going through a divorce or something. I mean, yeah, it's like a terrible divorce, maybe worse.
And just the, I know people like way overuse the word trauma and stuff and PTSD and stuff, but yeah, to have your house invaded by armed agents, it kind of takes away a very fundamental feeling of security. And it's hard to explain to anybody because it's just a house. They just took some stuff. They weren't even there to arrest me. They just stole all the shit, which eventually I got back. Had to sue them for 18 months to get it back. But yeah, it's a tad stressful to relive it. But I still have all the recordings. I still have all these like 7 different IRS meetings where they're going, oh, we don't know why it says that. And then
so we're gonna do that then at some point. When that'll happen, we don't know, but we're going to do that. We can't just let that disappear into the ether. I don't think, especially if there's recordings of you in court. Were you going off? Were you animated like you were in this interview? Were you like that? With the and the courtroom was packed.
In the opening and closing, yeah, and the courtroom was packed.
That's great.
So yeah, I haven't yet listened to the recording.
Really? Oh wow! There you go. You got something to do for your Sunday now.
Not yet.
All right, Larken, before I let you get out of here, just my last question for you. Where are we going? What's going to happen? Give me your 10-year prediction of what this is going to look like as far as this clown world system. If you had to predict in 10 years, what's this all going to look like?
10 years. That's sort of close to,
say 20 years. If 20 years, if you need it.
Okay. I'll do 20 years first, because I think in 20 years we will actually be seeing significant portions, significant areas where the people there don't recognize any political rulers. I suspect some will be in what's now the US, even if it's just patches here and there. I think in 100 years it will literally be most of the world, because the cascade effect, when you, like we were talking before, if 10% of the people were voluntarist, that's the end of any ruling class. Like 90% could go, well, we're proud to obey the law and pay our taxes and blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine. But they can't enforce it on 10% of us, which means you 90%, each one of you is thinking in your head, wait, you mean, so if I didn't pay, they couldn't do anything to me either? It's like, and then just self-interest kicks in and nobody pays anymore. Even the ones who are like, well, I think we should pay our taxes, but this year I can't, so screw them. And so I think the assumption that I think some people have is, well, you have to get to 100%. No, you don't. Like 10% of people going, yeah, we're not doing this. I mean, even, Gandhi in India, I'm by no means a pacifist. But when they're just like, yeah, we're going to go collect our own salt from the sea and you can beat us up. But given that there's like however many million of us, eventually you're literally going to get tired of beating us up. And that's what happened. They didn't fight back. And the British were like, you're not allowed to do that. Bam, bam, bam. You're not allowed to do that. Bam, bam, bam. And they look and there's a line stretching as far as they can see. And they're like, screw this. We're leaving. Like we can't, even without them lifting a finger to fight, we can't do anything. Well, if you lift a finger, and there's lots of fingers and trigger fingers in the US, that if 1% says, not only am I not doing this, but if you come and try to enforce this, bad things will happen to you overnight. Like things become unenforceable. And when the whole world sees, oh, that's all it took. Just if we all just say, no, screw you. And a lot of people weirdly learned that during COVID. That, yeah, if enough people say, no, up yours, we're not playing that game, suddenly, oh, there aren't negative consequences to disobedience because enough people said, we're not playing that game. And then the government goes, oh, never mind. We're not even going to try because we know we'd lose. So we'll repeal it and pretend it was our idea. And so I think you're going to see more and more of that. And I think 10 or 20 years, there will be large areas where thugs of the state don't dare to go, and nobody tries to govern it because they realize it's going to go very badly for you if you try. And then I think after that, it's a slow people learning by example, by being able to watch and go, oh, you mean people can just be people without bowing to a ruling class? Who'd have thought? But I think that right now, I think that is happening way more quickly than I ever would have predicted 15 to 20 years ago. I would have thought it was going to take centuries. And now I see so many normal people sliding in the direction of, yeah, why are we bowing to these crooks at all? That I think that avalanche can pick up speed very quickly. I do think the second Trump presidency is good in that we need more Republicans to be stabbed in the back for 4 more years to realize, yeah, he wasn't your savior either.
I think it would have been, I used to think that, but now that I see what's going on, I actually think we really missed an opportunity that will come anyway. I think where if she had gotten in, it would have been so blatantly obvious that they cheated, even though it would have been so obvious that they installed her, and her policies would have been, where her regime's policies would have been so wicked and stupid. I really think that we would have had a couple states legitimately secede, say we're not doing this anymore. Not just like kind of like Florida did. I mean, like legitimately, we could have had. Now you've got everybody's back on board to the old golden age and yada yada yada. Like you said, he's going to prove himself to be not what they think he is, and that could be a great opportunity. Boy, but I think we might have missed it with her because it would have been awful with her. I mean,
yeah, I think either way there would have been opportunities for widespread disobedience and resistance. I think right now Republicans still imagine themselves to be pro-freedom and anti-establishment.
yes.
So they could have disobeyed her while still saying, this is why we need Republicans in.
Fair enough.
But either way, people are learning to say no, which is really, it's at the end of the day, that is the thing that matters, is human beings learning to say no to those who think they have the right to rule us.
And you think 10, 20 years, there'll be pockets, maybe we'll even have a homeland.
Yeah.
See what happens in New Hampshire is interesting to me. So what they've got with the Free State Project.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
And it doesn't take all that many people to just go, yeah, we're not playing your game. Leave us alone.
I'd say this, and I'll leave with this. Stop calling them we. This is a really important one. You hear even the most freedom-minded people, when they talk about the U.S. regime, the United States federal regime, they don't separate them from Americans.
Yeah.
There's us and them. We're not we. We're the government. The government is us. We did this. We invaded there. We didn't do anything. We're occupied by a federal regime. We're Americans. That's them. That's a really powerful tool in what we talked about, the elevation of consciousness. And there was something else I wanted to say, but I forgot what it was. What did you say a second ago? Oh, I know what it is. When people say to you, well, what's your solution? What's your solution? I always say, now you're thinking. That's it. Now you're thinking. Now you're on the right mindset. What's the solution? Exactly. Let's figure it out.
And the short version of the solution is disobey and resist. But it's a numbers game. Like, it matters how many people are to the point that they're willing to disobey and resist people treating them like livestock. And if someone isn't ready, okay, well, you're not the solution yet. Let me know when you get around to the point where you're abused enough that you're willing to go, maybe we shouldn't go along with this crap anymore.
Yeah, look, don't worry about the solutions right now. You've gotten shot in the stomach. You're on the battlefield. You're dying. Somebody wants to sew you up and save you. Let's focus on saving you right now. Worry about the solutions later. Just start with that.
Yeah.
Start with understanding the situation you're in, being honest with yourself about it. And at least you can live in the state of like, you really understand what's going on. You see the truth for what it is. That's the first step.
Yeah. And that's why that's my entire focus, is just people's mindset. What they do about it later is one thing, but I'll finish with the Frederick Douglass thing. Him physically escaping the South, kind of impressive. Him mentally escaping the mental chains that were bludgeoned into his head since birth, that was impressive. And that is what humanity needs to do. The practical, what do we do after the fact? Meh, I don't really care. When enough people have escaped the notion that we're beholden to a bunch of political crooks because they say so, the rest is going to take care of itself.
Larken, where can people find you?
LarkenRose.com has a bunch of stuff. TheRoseChannel.com is a subscriber site that has a number of videos. It also has our Candles in the Dark course. It has a bunch of stuff that you won't find in other places. And for a bunch of free stuff, YouTube /Larken Rose has 8 bazillion free videos of mine.
All right, brother. Thank you so much. That was fun.
Yeehaw.
Insanity is what I call society.
Okay, thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at Tregsman with 2 G's and an S. We'll also have the links to our subscription and social media in the show notes, wherever you watched or listened to the episode. If you're currently supporting the show and Drew TV, thank you, and we'll see you next week.